We all are only 1 degree removed from knowing someone who is being impacted by workplace violence or some form of online exploitation. This issue filters into employee wellness, impacting engagement at work. Let's bridge this gap by bringing awareness and education to these pressing issues and shield the vulnerable. Welcome back, everybody, to another podcast of Shield the Vulnerable, Untold Stories. Super pumped for today's episode and this guest. This guy has done a ton, even though you labeled yourself just another guy, right? So
I'm just a guy.
You're just a guy. Adam Hickman, you are the VP of Organizational and Employee Development for Partners Financial Credit Union, which is part of the Walt Disney Company. I'm going to argue that you're not just a guy. I appreciate your very humbled approach to that, but you are a keynote speaker. You've got over 23 years working in human resources. You've worked for companies like AT&T, Gallup. But I think what's really cool, Adam, and we were just talking before we started this, you're in full creation mode today. You're writing, you got a lot of stuff, but you already have 3 books out there. One, Practical Application, The Theory. Another book, Don't Be a Jerk and Work Your Tail Off. I love that title. And Grit and Gratitude, the science and art of a successful career in life, that you just won an award, 2025 International Impact Book Award. So you're not just a guy, Adam.
I guess so. Every time I hear an intro, I'm like, oh man, I got to get a hobby or something. But this is my hobby. I love what I do, and it's a blessing that other people find it as interesting as I do.
Yeah. Well, when I learned more about your guys, I watched you speak at a virtual event, and I was like, oh man, I got to talk to this guy. And I did. I was like, hopefully I can get him on our podcast, because you offer so much when it comes to employee wellness, employee engagement, man. You are an expert on this topic. And what I found really cool too, is you were a trusted HR advisor globally. And work in Saudi, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. You're part of MIT's cybersecurity for HR. But when I asked you, I'm like, what got you to that point? And you told me, you're like, well, in 2019, I published this dissertation on remote working for workplace isolation. And you're like, it just took off. You did this when you were an employee at Gallup.
Yes. Yeah. Totally unexpected. It was charted territory for me because I had worked remote a little bit at both AT&T and Gallup. And it just, to me, it's always fascinating on when I think, do we really need to drive to the office to sit in meetings and sit? I don't know. So it was something we wanted to explore. Little did I know what was ahead of us.
Yeah, you were ahead of the curve on this one.
Yeah, more than I anticipated, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, when I saw you speak before, it was all about employee engagement, right? And I think a big question out there that people have is, isn't employee engagement, right? Isn't it enough that I'm just giving them a paycheck, or is it possible to get performance without engagement? So Adam, why should anybody care about engagement? Why does it matter?
Yeah. So I love this. And the tagline to this is engagement yields performance. If you remember anything from our segment, remember that comes first. And let me prove it out.
Engagement yields performance.
Yes, every single time. Now, the difference is what are you doing with engagement? And engagement can sound like a lot of things. Unfortunately, the Hollywood bias towards it is, do you have the bells and whistles? The people that are worried about the tangible in office stuff. I think we've got away from that. I think that's been discussed enough, but maybe not. But some people that think, hey, if we bring in free lunch or the nonsense, sometimes I think, am I at a YMCA or am I at a workplace? Because I'm not sure what you're trying to do here. It's not that. It's intrinsically, do my people, are they motivated and driven by our purpose of our company? Do they get the information they need from leaders, from me on a daily basis that impacts their work? And the home run to this is, do your job demands of the role, can your employees articulate in a way that shows how it helps the customers that you have, but also awards them the benefit of saying what they get to do? I think I always joke that you can find the most disengaged employees Sunday nights on social media, because they're the ones that are, oh my gosh, I have to go to work tomorrow. Or the one I cracked up earlier this year is, I saw a TikTok on what days of the week, what days to take off this year to give you the longest possible vacation.
Yeah.
To me, I'm
People
like,
are gaming the system. They're gaming the
I
system.
guess, but like, if you hate your job, why are you in it? No one's
Yeah.
forcing you to stay there. I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but I literally mean that. If you, I'll hear stories of people driving to work, upset stomach, or just they don't want to go in, or they hate what they do. I'm always what the go on LinkedIn. There's tons of jobs out there right now. That it's
Yeah.
why spend the amount of time hours in a job that you just can't stand?
And you hit a huge point there, right? People feeling sick to their stomach. How many people are silently quitting, really
Oh, sure.
disengaged, right? But so many
Yeah.
people they settle, right? It's
Hmm.
security, they feel good, but they're lacking that purpose behind what they do
Yeah.
and finding that, right? So you said something really interesting when you kind of, open that up. You're like, maybe we'll give them some free lunches or, maybe
Hmm.
we'll set up a ping pong table. I worked for an organization, and this is going back about 6 or 7 years ago, and I had a friend who was not quite at the decision making stage or making bigger decisions, but he was headed in that
Hmm.
direction in his career. I'm sitting
Hmm.
down with him one day and he's like, Dave, he looks outside the window. He's like, I don't know, you think if I put a basketball court out there for the guys and girls to go shoot some hoops, like, would that help? I just smiled. I'm like, they might have fun, but I'm like, if that's how you're looking at solving the engagement problem that we have here, I'm like, you're missing the boat culturally. Like
Yeah.
you're not in tune with it. I'm like, I think you got to dive a little
Yeah.
bit deeper. So where do people go into going, okay, well, hey, we're providing free lunches. We're given, these things. Like, what's the real secret, Adam, to that long-term engagement and true buy-in from employees where they're passionate
Hmm.
about going to work and they love what they do?
Yeah. Well, we'll answer that, but I feel remiss if I didn't bring this up. We've actually studied it when you do turn on what I call the nonsense features. So like basketball court, if you do that in the wrong environment, which is majority of them, you actually make it worse. And it's hard to come back from because employees
Really?
see you spending time, money, and effort on things that mean nothing to them. And
Mm-hmm.
it starts the confusion on why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just ask us on what it is? Um, Here's the shift I think
I
people
love that
should,
perspective.
yeah, that I think people need to make. And it's a play on words, but there's a longitudinal part to this that has meaning behind it. If if we stop trying to get people to get bought into something and get them to believe in, that's a big difference. If you're going to make any sort of behavior change, if you're going to have a lasting impact, it's not just a bought. So, like to me, a buy-in is I hate to in terms of money, but it's like, hey, I bought into this NCAA bracket right now, right? I could win or
Mm-hmm.
lose. I don't know. I don't have a lot of passion around it, but yeah, I'll buy into that. Sure. Now, belief, right? That completely changes perspectives on. You kind of got me at the core. You know, it wakes me up. You know what's intrinsically motivating to me. You know my strengths. You know uh, what drives me. Like you just got a whole different perspective on, hey, do you believe in this or not? And if you don't, okay, well, help me understand where is it? Not always is there going to be 100% what I would say believe in, but it gets us past the point of stop worrying about buy-in. If buy-in comes and goes, a belief behind something will stick for as long as you want them to until we shift perspectives again. But it's just
Yeah.
a friend of mine that we're working on something here. Hopefully, this next year we can have an instrument behind it. But it's not about change. When people say it's change affects engagement, sure. But I always say, but you also miss the other word in front of that, which is unexpected change or undesirable change. So if we continue down that same path of like, things are going to change, people are going to be disengaged, like, but no, it's the undesirable or the unexpected because we failed to communicate. They know change is
Yeah.
going to happen on a daily basis. It happens to us all the time. But if it was undesired or unexpected, that's where you run into the problems that you have. I think the easiest way to think through it is like imagine, a stop sign being put on your street that you didn't know, and now it's there. Well, that's a change, definitely undesirable, definitely unexpected because you didn't know it's coming, and now you got to deal with it on a daily basis. Versus if
Mm-hmm.
they'd have got ahead of it, prepared, done all the pieces of the belief on why it should be there, it's a little bit different of it, which totally changes your. in my mind, belief in should this be here or not.
100%. So the belief
Hmm.
is the proactive approach, and the buy-in is more reactive, saying we've
Yeah.
done this and now we're hoping people buy into it. So when you're working onto that belief
Hmm.
structure, are you seeing organizations, are they floating ideas out there? Are they finding, what are the core things that the employees want through surveys, through engagement meetings and finding out? Because you can't just implement something too and then hope that the belief comes with it. Like you have to do that pre-work. Great analogy
Hmm.
using the stop sign, right?
Hmm.
Let's do the pre-work. Let's
Yeah.
engage people with this. Let's educate people. Let's get them prepared for it.
Yeah.
And you can mold it a little bit. Like, how are you seeing, how is a company like yours doing a really great job at this?
Yeah. So a couple schools of thought on this. One is when someone says like, well, how do we know that we're ready to make the change? Well, there's a billion different ways to measure it, but your best your best indication of are you ready for something? You don't need an instrument. You don't need AI. You don't need an app. You need to have the pulse by walking around. And I mean, that's very old school to think, but you'll feel it knowing if you've tuned into your employees well enough and you've got listening approaches out there on how are we doing pre, during, and after. Now, if you want to go really nerdy on this, this is what I was pulling up. There's a theory called theory of planned behavior. It
Mm-hmm.
has been around for decades and in psychology, and it focuses on three specific areas of getting people ready for anything that could be disengaging, which is what's their attitudes or beliefs behind it, the subjective norms. So on a daily basis, what are they around? And then the perceived behavior control is once this is out there, how are people perceived that they've got the ability to do this? To me, you steal this from psychology and put it into practice with understanding like, hey, if we're going to, let's say we're going to change, let's say we're going to change pay, right? And actually we're going to do a decrease. Everybody loses 3%. Now
Mm-hmm.
you can better believe the attitude of that right off the go, right? Nobody wants to experience that. The norms are that's where your cultures come into. So what are the, is our culture one of belief that the for us to have doors remain open that we have to do this? This is another one of those things that's going on in the tower. Kind of just gives you the day in day out the micro cultures that are out there on how this is going to be perceived. Then the behavior control is like, well, what if I don't want to? What if I want to opt out of this, or what if I don't want to be here anymore? You just get a good indication running down those three on okay, so should we do this or not? Because the next rung to the right would be the intention on we had good intentions, but apparently we're not ready for this yet. Or this was, bad intentions and we got the behavior we expected going through this. But to me, any practitioners out there, that's a great model to pick up and run with that's just been tried and true over and over and over.
So tried and true, find models
Mm-hmm.
that work. Because I know, and I've talked to leaders, they're like, I don't know where to begin. How do we start? And there's a fear. It's an overwhelming sense, right? Like sometimes you're
Yeah.
staring at like a mountain pile of crap that's been built
Mm-hmm.
up for years and years and years, and you're coming in now going, I got to fix this somehow. And rather than reinventing the wheel, right, look at
Right.
what other successful organizations are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. The best thing you can do for your own engagement in your own company is study your best.
Yeah.
And not mediocre. I'm talking your all stars, the ones that if you fired everybody today, who you hiring back tomorrow? Those are your all stars. The
Mm-hmm.
reason being is they figured this out. They know how to self engage, which is the crescendo of engagement. That I mean, you don't need to be a helicopter. You check in it. It's your LeBrons of the NBA, right? You
Yeah.
need a coach on the sideline to help you and guide you, but they got the ball. They know exactly what to do with it, right? They're going to run the court as they see fit. Same thing with this is that the more you put intention and time behind these things, the less frustrating it's going to be for you. When you're studying your best, you will get, hey, this is the culture we've created with All Stars. How do we
Mm-hmm.
replicate that?
Yeah. Yeah. It gets easier by the day as you do
Can I
it.
mean, I always crack up when we get into conversations of, well, can you do this? How long is this going to take? Well, how long did it take to get to where we are? It's
Right.
not right. So just go ahead
Yeah.
and put that on the other side.
You can't fix what's taken 10, 15 years to get to where you are overnight, right? And people have that
Yeah,
misconception going, well, fix it and fix it quick. We need a fix.
yeah, yeah.
But I think that's where when you do that, you end up trying to force buy-in
Mhm.
versus belief. Okay, I'll
Mhm.
throw a Band-Aid on it, but we're going to get buy-in. But how long does that buy-in last? NCAA example you just gave. I'm in a bracket. It's okay. I'm into it because I've bought in a little bit. But
Mhm.
once March Madness is over, the bracket's done, you're out of it. You're not engaged
Right.
anymore.
Right.
I'm going to pull up a graph here. You and I were talking about this
Yeah.
earlier. And, I love that you previously had worked at Gallup
Mhm.
to talk about this. So we've got this annual employee engagement in the US, world, and best practice for organizations. Let's talk about this. Let's walk through it. You
Yeah.
and I were talking about the new Gallup report that came out today as well. But let's look at the US right now, and then we'll switch over to
Sure.
best practice. But kind of walk through for people who are viewing this. So it's an employee engagement link. We'll drop it in the call notes afterwards too for anybody who's listening to this. You can check it out after. But we're looking at rates of employee engagement in the US
Mhm.
beginning in the year 2000 all the way up until 2024, right? And it's a pretty
Mhm.
steady line, kind of working us from the low point, I think, is 26% of employees are engaged, but our highest point is 36%. So, let's walk through this and kind of explain for
Yeah.
viewers, what this means.
Yeah. You got it. So let's back into this with which I, with the micro, what do I want to call this? Macroeconomics, I guess, would be the best fit for this.
All right.
So, Dave, think of a product that you spend more money on because you enjoy the experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind?
I mean, it's not necessarily from a product. For that would be travel,
Okay.
a vehicle, right? They're usually more larger purchases, but that I attach that experience to it.
Okay. Is there a specific brand that you stick to?
Not always. I mean, I love going on cruises, right? Royal Caribbean has been a brand, but I've cruised them all, right? So it depends to me. It's not necessarily the brand. It's like, what experience are you going to give me on that ship, or what is it that I'm looking for, whether it be entertainment, dining, what my kids may
Okay.
get from it, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Very similar to this. I would say my guilty product is Bose. I will spend way more money than I need to with them,
Mm-hmm.
but I love the whole experience from the packaging to the cards they give you in there, the unbox. I mean, the whole thing, and then the product is just as phenomenal as possible. That experience built is due to an engagement level on the other side that they have the same sense of pride and responsibility into their brand promise that you're going to feel it even though you're not in front of a consumer. So here's how this starts to pan out is that Dr. Jim Harder's I would say the IP genius behind this at Gallup. If you ever want to track him on Gallup, he's a great read. Uh, but his reporting and the team there really focuses on not just the employee engagement level as it is as you see here, but I always think it's what's underneath it. So something he would often say to me is, and others would be, it's less about the number and more what caused it. So as you're looking year over year here, you'll see there's some pretty monumental dates throughout here that if you looked in terms of things going on in society, there's a direct correlation to, oh my gosh, employee engagement in the US has changed. Now, what's the reason behind that?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you get into things like, well, how are you managing engagement as a normal? If you're just doing a once a year survey, way to go on the survey, but what did you do afterwards?
Yeah.
What'd you do in front of it? Right? You got confirmation that I'm willing to bet you knew what we were going to get, but it's now what are you standing up in terms of actions on the other side or not? So this gives you a pretty good linear process on where have we been US global and then best practice. Now, the best practice organizations up top there, that is based on their database related to their Q12 survey. Are you familiar, Dave, with the Q12 through Gallup?
No, not the. So I follow Gallup. I read a lot of the reports, but the Q12, no.
Yeah. 12 questions. Q12, pretty intuitive to call it that. But it focuses on just basic needs, individual contribution, teamwork, and growth.
Okay.
Those four areas divided into 12 questions. Your highest best practicing organizations in their database that is, I mean, ginormous at this point, tells us that the higher the engagement, the higher the return. I mean, from stock to on and on it goes. You're going to see the biggest return in your organization if you're at that best performing practice. But for those that are not Q2 or Q12 clients, or they have other mechanisms they're using for engagement, the US trend gives you an idea of just about where we were. The thing that always gives me a little bit of nerve wracking moments is it's not just the number that's here, it's the inverse. So, like on the green line, where are we at right now? We're at 31%. So,
yeah.
I mean, just for your own sake, if you're working at an organization and we're saying 31% of the US is engaged, well, what about the rest of them? What are they doing on a daily basis? And engaged means there's three levels in this. Are engaged, or disengaged, and actively disengaged. So a good story to think of is if you're walking down the street and you turn into the workplace and there's trash on the ground. Well, your most engaged employees, which would be representative here, are going to pick it up and probably bring back the facility as a way that, hey, we need an extra trash can here. It's not working. Your disengaged employees, they saw it. They thought about it. Not really interested. And then the actively disengaged is likely the one that threw it on the ground in the first place. You got those three working with everybody, in organizations every single day. What this is showing is that the highly engaged is that US trend number that you're seeing there.
Okay. Awesome. What's the difference now between what your best practice organizations are doing to your global counterparts here in the US? What's happening in those?
Yeah. I can make one contrast that would cover both, but it gets very specific to industries. The biggest indicator to where you're going to land on these numbers is one role in your organization called a manager. They own up to 70% of this number every interaction. So when questioned on how do we solve for this, there's not a training, there's not a AI bot, there is only the thing called manager development. The better the manager you have in spot that thinks every day, hey, what's my job today? It's to coach and develop my employees. Great. Easy to say, really hard to do and put into practice day in, day in, day out. But those that are in that blue line are trending on, they're very clear on what's expected of them at work even more. Their employees are clear on what's expected of me at work. When we say we've got the materials and equipment to do my work right, materials and equipment to somebody new to this immediately jumps to, do I have 13 monitors in my home office so I can control the world? No, you probably only need two. Do I have fill in the blank with a materialistic type of piece of equipment versus those that have a higher intensity for engagement? They don't even think materials and equipment is tangible. They think intangible things. Do I have the right policies, the right practices, the right access, the right SMEs when I need them? Do I, is there a hierarchy I can't break through when I need to? So that's where you start to get into the differences between these. And the reason why, I used to hear at Gallup on, you had the same 12 questions for so many years. When are you going to update them? And I think the best response I ever heard was, well, when we start managing to them right, they would change them. But to this date, some of these questions are simple to read, but again, hard to put into practice if you don't have the right manager talent in place.
Yeah. That's insightful, right? And it leads to where we are. And when we look at it, so I'll pull up the map here and I'll show it just for a visual, right? Based on country. Again, we'll drop this link in the call notes for everybody. Interesting here that Greenland is not at all highlighted. It's about the only one that's really not. But we're seeing within 5 to 10 points some pretty consistent numbers globally. What is that? You're looking at a lot of cultural differences, a lot of different variables when you're looking across this globally. But what's standing out to me is that there's not one that's like through the roof leading it or one that's like really down. Like we're looking at some pretty standard numbers across the board here.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think in different areas of the world, I mean, I'll tell you a story here of a couple of the countries I've been to, what I picked up on. But the word in itself, employee engagement, still gives people the squishy mentality on like, oh gosh, you're going to ask me, do I like one another? Is this a happy place to work? yeah, it's still in my mind, some pockets of industries, it still hasn't got the edge to. You want to increase performance in to where your board feels it. You start paying attention to engagement now. You
Hmm.
want to see a turn in direction on how we're doing related to goals and objectives. Start worrying about engagement on a daily basis. When it stops being a survey and starts being a requirement for performance, total change in pace. And I know that because I've seen on the other side of those that were in that blue line category, the just return in their companies and how they're performing. It would be advantageous of everybody to go through that exercise at some point, but you see the return on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So I still think that's a thing. The other thing is, I mean, in the United States, I think we have more of a, what's a way to say, more of a pride culture on we're very particular to what we've done and what we've accomplished. And so if you've put a score out there, it's one of the underbellies to the U.S. is we now hear competition. And so, oh yeah, we're going to compete. Now you have a percent. Of course, we're going to chase after that. In other countries, it's less about the pride aspect and more of a, almost like a commandeering type of thing. Like when I was in Dubai, it was a lot of the questions and things that I was hearing wasn't about like a scoreboard conversation, or wasn't that. It was more of the influence and change it was going to have in their country or on the world itself. So it had a little different spin to it. You go to Saudi Arabia, very close knit, but still there was a hierarchy in place that I could hear and observe. No, well, where would this fit in just yet? So I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look, but I would imagine if you look at that same map 10, 15 years ago, you would see less and less green. And then, over time, the evolution of it has taken over to where it's at today. But until somebody wakes up and realizes engagement's just not a thing, it's probably your biggest item that can unlock performance in your employees. That won't change.
What needs to happen to create the change? How do you make that movement that, not just
Yeah.
in an organization globally, how do you create that culture
Yeah.
where everybody
Uh,
operates?
for practitioners, it's probably the most frustrating thing in the world.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you don't have the grit and patience, good luck. The thing that I think that has worked most successfully is when one pocket of a division can go through an engagement type of intervention, or they start to care more. The manager has the belief in it. The questions are there. The state of the team conversations take place. It starts to be almost a talent magnet because you'll see the attitudes change. I mean, this is cliche to say, but they seem like they're having more fun than they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
But by the way, they're still crushing their work. They still get things
Yeah.
done that's required. We don't have to make it such a stoic type of way of doing things.
Yeah.
And to me, my tax has been, if I'm getting into a space that this is one of those, like, don't say the word engagement. It's work with your teams that you can have the biggest influence before you try and do the big overhaul at a company standpoint.
Yeah. What comes to mind, right? We live in this era, and it's been around forever,
Mm-hmm.
where we have like a forced compliance, right?
Yeah.
So you have these companies, that set these big annual goals, or, from a Jim Collins, like a big BHAG, right? That big, hairy,
Mm-hmm.
audacious goal. And you get some buy-in, some excitement, but then you end up going with forced compliance, right?
Yep.
And I get it. In a big organization, there's going to be a bottleneck somewhere. You can even from the top have the best leadership,
Mm-hmm.
but if you get a bottleneck in there somewhere, it can really mess with the system.
Yeah.
And now you start trying
Yep.
to force people into belief, right? Believe it or
Yeah.
else, or go look somewhere else. And now
Right.
back to the start of our
Right.
conversation, you got people sick to
Yeah.
their stomach driving to work
Yep.
because they're being
There's
forced into this, right? They'll smile and nod in a meeting and all these things,
yes.
but that's having a massive impact on companies. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. The frustration around that aspect of it, and then just knowing what engage. I don't want to say engagement's free, because there's definitely a cost to it in terms of time and effort and things of that sort. But some of the most basic things that we do. This is one of the stuff that we're writing today. Is just a course related to managing the basics. just the interactions. I think Dr. Harder once put out there that if you want to have the biggest influence and change on your team, have one meaningful conversation a week. And,
with the
boil it
team or
down
with the person,
with the
individuals,
person,
with the
with the
person.
individual. What's funny is like, oh gosh, I could do that. And then you pull up your calendar and you're like, what? Can I get all of them in this week? Maybe.
Yeah.
But then comes the, outreach on, it doesn't have to be a scheduled one-on-one. It could be a one-off. It could be, a Teams message. It could be an email, something. The difference is if it is meaningful to them, will you see their engagement change?
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of pitches this last 2 years on even one that said they can track the engagement to the minute, but they were doing like a bolt on to technology on how many emails do you respond to certain time periods, and do you respond to your team messages? It was kind of like your movement throughout the day. And I was like, well, what if I'm stuck in meetings all day? You're going to tell me I'm disengaged?
Right.
So I didn't really understand the point of that one. But where I'm going is this doesn't have to be labor intensive, but it definitely needs to be intentional on what are you going to pay attention to.
And it needs to become a habit, because you can have that, all the best intentions in the world, and I'm going to have one meaningful conversation a week with individuals throughout.
Yeah.
And then people don't do it, right? They don't make time for it. But like you say, it doesn't have to be time constrictive. Can it be a Teams message? Can it be an email? Can it be a text? I passed you in the parking lot, or we're walking out the door together. Stop. And people, here's the key difference in that to me. People can sift through the BS. You have to genuinely mean it. I can't say it because I can't do it because a textbook told me to do it, or I heard it on a podcast, or Adam said I have to start having more meaningful conversations. You have to genuinely care about your people. You have to care about their well-being. You have to care about their family. You have to care about the world outside of work, and they have to feel it, because people will smell it from a mile away if it's not real.
100%. Yeah.
They will smell it.
Yeah. And it's knowing them on your way that you have to change your style that they hear you. And this is lately I've had to spend less and less time convincing people at conferences what I mean by this, but it's the command and control works in safety environments and life or death situations, right? We're not saying you need to coach an employee to not step on something that's going to cause physical harm to them. Okay? You don't need to coach them through that. Just command and control the situation. But what I on the other side is that's become less and less. And if the assumption's out there now that, hey, I'm going to be me and you're going to adapt to me, good luck. You're in for a long career. It's not going to. I mean, you might be successful in case of if you want to lead by fear, but you will not be remembered as the most influential. It's those that have spent the meaningful time with their employees to know, do I have to start my call on relationships, or can I get right into work? Do I have to, what am I going to say to the, if I know an employee has high drive and competition, I'll use phrases like, hey, this hasn't been done before. Are you interested? Oh my God. Yes. Right. Cause that just, and to me, I'm like, yes, give me it. Right. We'll run with this. Or if those have more ties to relationship type, both themes of strengths, to hear how many people are involved and what we need you to do to network and all, then it just starts to drive again. So it is the intentional aspect of once a week, but then also the bonus prize is if you've got it tuned into knowing your employees so well that they'll hear you differently as you switch, you can do no harm in that.
For you, who's your top 3 to 5? They could be big household names. They could be names that people don't know. But there's people out there that we can mirror, that we can learn from. Who's yours? Who's your 3 to 5?
Yeah, you were the first person to ask this, and I love this because I've been waiting for someone to ask me for so long on this.
The question popped in my head. I'm like, oh, I've probably been asked this question 100 times. So that's awesome. That's amazing.
No, you take the title on that one. But it's unique because I would classify me as crazy on this one. I study people, wildly successful people, for different reasons. Yeah. So like, where do I get my motivation from? I love it in the workplace. David Goggins probably is my go-to. Like he's a hard driver for me. I can throw him on in the background, and if you've never listened to him, don't do it with kids in the room.
Yeah, there's something super intrinsic about him. Even reading his, like when I was reading his book, it was like, okay, I'm reading about another race. I'm reading about another race, but there was something about it, the way he told that story, that I couldn't put it down.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love his story. And it's so unique. And, I've listened to a couple interviews about why he doesn't want to have a Netflix series done on him. And he sticks
Yeah.
to the core, everything. He's like, nobody wants to hear my story. I'm telling you, nobody wants to hear it. But
Yeah.
secretly, we do want to hear it, by the way, Goggins.
Okay. So you got David Goggins. All right. I love it.
Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
um, if I'm doing keynotes or something on a stage, I will study the daylights out of Kevin Hart. He is a mastermind in working the stage, but his background's
Storytelling.
match. Oh my gosh. Just how he does the swings from joke to joke and how he ties it all together and does, just phenomenal speaker. And heck of a comedian, but I love comedians, especially those that are coming through the rank, because they have such a tact for words and language. It's so beneficial I used this one company I work for. I found this, not Kevin Hart, but somebody similar. He was Breakfast with Bubba. He was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so I called the radio station and I just said, hey, this is totally random. I don't want anything other than for you to come to one of my team meetings and tell me how you set up for a show. Because I think if my team hears this, I can build off of it. So what it was is they ended up coming to our work, to one of our team meetings. He said, well, what did you want me to talk about? And I just said, the way that we set up trainings and the way that we do consultative type of work mirrors what I hear you do on a regular basis, which is what's coming up. And then you transition to the next thing, or you talk about the topic and you throw out a question. So I said, just tell me how you set up for your show. And he goes into this whole process of how they do that. And I was like, that's it. There you go. So I'll run with that for as long as I can. So I can't think of his actual name, but if you hear it on the radio, you know what I mean.
All right. All right. David Goggins, Kevin Hart. Yep. Can't think of his actual name.
No, I wish I could too. He since went to work for Delta, so I've lost ties with him. For just day-to-day inspiration, as long as I've been at Gallup before coming over to Partners, Jim Clifton always struck a chord with me.
Yeah,
because he's really prolific.
Clifton Strengths Finder.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can find him on YouTube. I still throw on some of his YouTubes and just play it in the background still. He's got just the wise businessman mentality of how do you take topics like we're talking about and frame it in a way that a CFO and CEO hears you differently because you can monetize it. And where I think a big gap in practice for anybody that's working in the engagement is, you know what you want to do. You don't necessarily know how yet because you got to work with the organization as it is. But you also miss the ties to, why does anybody in the business care about this? What are they going to get? And you could hear certain hints that he'll drop on YouTube clips that are out there still, that he'll tell the story of engagement, or tell the story of other things that they've done related to this. And to me, it's just inspiring to hear that somebody for that long of that stature is still out there beating the same drum that he was, 20, 30 years ago, by just asking questions and knowing and studying organizations as they have, to say, hey, this matters. This is as important as anything else you've got going on.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Favorite book? What's your book? If you said, and it can't be your own, we'll plug those later.
Yeah. Gosh,
what's a go-to book? Like one that you could read over and over?
Oh boy.
Or study. And I'm not talking read, like what's a book you can pick up and study?
I got to peek at my shelf because these are the good ones that I keep. Wisdom is a Teams. That is, it's a Harvard Business Press book. But if you're an IO person or you're an L&D or OD, Wisdom is a Teams is a tried and true way. I think those that are of this era and that are the all-stars can pick up that book, read it, get a thought in mind, and then do an adaptation of it. But that's a lifer. You got to read that one. First, Break All the Rules. First of all, the name of it is what caught my attention, because I always joke with my kids about, hey, rules are meant to be broken. Not really though. But the first Break All the Rules is a good ticket for entry on, if you don't buy into engagement, if you don't think that any of this matters, read that. I'd be willing to say you have a change of
And
heart after that.
and that does bring us, when we're talking about, okay, it's 15 years of stuff here that you're trying to
Yeah.
fix, and where does somebody begin? First, break all the rules, right?
hmm Yeah.
Learn
Yeah.
and use it
Yeah.
as a playbook.
I'm certain they still get this, but the one question on, I have a best friend at work. Everyone would always used to, I mean, that's literally the question. People always had a problem with it. Like, why do I need this? But what I would argue and have for years on this is I'm certain that you do have a best friend at work. Now they don't have the name tag that they wear on a daily basis, and we're not going to assign you one when you get hired. But if you do have that trusted partner in your organization that, hey, you have a rough day, who are you going to call? Probably your best friend at work. You need to bounce an
Mm-hmm.
idea off somebody, you go to Teams. Who you gonna? It's that go-to person every single time, and we've seen that over time. That if you have rated that higher, you've got mutual trust, which is a outcome that I think anybody wants in an organization to say, how do we do more of that? Well, you've got to create scenarios that people can build best friends at work, not just colleagues.
I think that's one of the best things that came out of it. It's so simple, but it
Yeah,
is true. We need that
yeah,
person, right? You
absolutely.
have to have that person. So, Adam, we're wrapping up here shortly,
Yeah.
but what excites you about the future of employee wellness and engagement? Not what we see today, but where the future and the possibilities.
Yeah. Well, so, COVID was a pandemic, no doubt. I think the next pandemic is here right now, and we don't have a label for it, which is all around mental state in the workplace. If anything we get more ready for is how to help employees through the swing of all the mental exhaustion outside of the workplace, you're going to engage them even further than what they could be today, but you're also helping them at a life state as well. Prior to this starting here, I shared an example of, if you think of the years you spend, uh, grade school, adulthood, retirement, bulk of our time is spent at work. I think I wrote one point, I think it was like 60,000 out. I don't know. There's a wild number that's out there that you spend at work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you have talked to or met someone or know someone that has spent a career at something they hated doing. And more than likely, they're not the most fun and interactive person to work with outside of work.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're on the other side of that, where you do what you love, you're engaged in your work, you don't feel, trapped. Like on Saturday, I'm spending time on my calendar this week because I'm anxious to get started on Monday, even to the point where like maybe Sunday I can work something in. It doesn't feel like that, and it is hard to dial into it. It is totally possible. It is hard to dial into what it is that does for you. But your number one indicator as a manager, how do I help my people through that, is through engagement.
I love it. I love it. And you know what? You hit the point, nail right on the head there, that we're in a pandemic right now. There's just no name for
Mhm.
it. Right.
Yeah,
And people are silently suffering, and it doesn't have
yeah,
to be that way.
no, absolutely not. And it's frustrating to hear that. Yeah, I've heard people say like the Great Detachment. That's a theory that's out there. The quiet quitters or the stay. But I don't know how that's. Regardless what it is, I always say, well, why?
Yeah.
We just
We
like
don't have
we
to
label
accept
it.
it.
Yeah, like you're telling me you're acknowledging it and you're not doing anything as a result. So way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Contributing to it.
Yes.
Really, if
So
we're not standing up and fighting back against it, you're contributing to it. And
yes.
we
And
don't
yeah.
have to be.
Nope.
No.
No. There's 12 questions. There's other surveys out there that can help with this as well. There's just a stay interview. Why do you stay here? I'm sure my I'm sure my teams always crack up when I ask them some wild questions. So like, why are you here today? What gets you excited?
You know what, though? That needs to be integrated more than an exit interview, right? Well, you've quit. Let
Oh
me
yeah.
find out why. And you're going to tell me all these reasons why, and I'm not going to go and do anything about it anyways. So why
Yeah.
even have the exit interview?
Yep. Yeah.
Right? Let's
Well,
talk about a stay interview. I love that.
and the the icing on the cake in a stay interview is when you can do it in a way that they repeat back to you what they're responsible for and expected of them, because it matches with who they are. I can tell you one person, Shannon on my team. If I randomly just asked Shannon, "What are you doing here today? What's your purpose?" That's not going to come off offensive, that's going to engage her. Like, oh, let me tell you what I've got going on this week, next week, today. I mean, she'll run down the list. And all I did
Mm-hmm.
was spark the conversation. Just that conversation in itself would be an engagement aspect to her. I
And
almost feel
that'd be an
like,
engaging conversation. That'd be showing people that you care, like have a meaningful conversation.
yes, yeah. I wish we had more time. I'd say, Dave, let's pull her in. Let's do a live example of it.
Let's do it again another time.
You
That's
got it.
awesome. Let's do it. Adam, where can people find you? We got your books and everything else like that. But if somebody wants to
Yeah.
connect with you, if somebody wants to learn more, where do they find you at?
Yeah. Here's something I try and stay true to. If LinkedIn's the fastest, I don't understand Instagram and the rest of them. I probably should, but I don't. And TikTok, I'm just not doing. So LinkedIn's great. If you want to pick up a conversation on any topic related to the workplace, I will just send you a number and say, just call me. Let's not pass back and forth. If you are trying to sell me something, I am not going to respond to you. There are avenues for that as well. So just if it's a meaningful and it would help you, uh, that's part of being, I think, as a scholar in the field of, just reach out.
You know what? And that sums up why you are just another guy, because here I was when I first saw you. You're this rep from Disney, you're a VP title, and I'm watching you on this big event roundtable speaking. And I reach out, I make the connection. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, he's not going to talk to me. Like, and we've had some awesome conversations
Yeah,
since then. So I'm super, super appreciative of you and
yeah,
grateful
you
for your
got it.
time, because you are just another guy. You're doing so many things, Adam. You're changing through your own beliefs, your own actions, your own movements, the ability and the way in which people engage others in the workplace. So thank you for all of that.
You got
I love you dropping who your mentors are and some of your leaders. And you know what?
it.
Those were not at all what I was expecting, which made it even all the more better with
Yeah,
it.
sure.
I
Well, thank you
love
for
it.
asking finally. I was been
Yeah.
waiting for that one.
Yeah, I love it. For anybody listening, if you learned something today, if you laughed, if something Adam said that was insightful, please tell somebody about this podcast, share it. Don't forget to hit up our charity page where we're donating money back to A21 Human Trafficking, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as well. Adam, thank you again for being a great
You
guest
got it.
on here. Everybody, this has been another amazing episode of Shield the Vulnerable. Untold Stories. Stories were a little bit different this time, but Adam, that was truly amazing. Thank you very
You got
much.
it.